In today's world, where data fuels power and innovation drives global influence, technology has become the new battleground. The United States, long seen as a leader in advanced industries like semiconductors and artificial intelligence, has taken decisive action to protect its edge. Through sweeping export restrictions, the United States has drawn a line in the sand, targeting China's access to critical technologies. These measures are not just policy, they're a declaration of economic war. At the heart of this strategy is the semiconductor industry, the backbone of modern innovation. Semiconductors power everything from smartphones to supercomputers, and the United States has made it clear, losing its technological lead is not an option. Restrictions have been placed on key Chinese players like Huawei and Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, barring them from accessing cutting-edge chips and the tools to produce them. The United States has even extended its control by expanding the Foreign Direct Product Rule, ensuring that any product built with American technology cannot freely reach Chinese hands. But why such drastic measures? The answer lies in national security. Advanced technologies like artificial intelligence and quantum computing are not just tools for economic growth, they are pillars of military power and geopolitical influence. The United States fears that unfettered access to these technologies would give China an edge, shifting the balance of power in ways that could threaten not just America's dominance but global stability. Yet, as with any bold move, there are repercussions. China, far from being a passive observer, has responded with its own set of countermeasures. Beijing has enforced a ban on the export of rare and essential materials, resources critical for producing semiconductors, electronics, and even advanced weaponry. These include gallium and germanium, both indispensable for cutting-edge industries. By doing so, China is playing its trump card, leveraging its dominance in rare earth production to remind the world of its importance in the global supply chain. This tit-for-tat escalation is not merely an economic spat, it's a clash of visions for the future. On one side, the United States aims to safeguard its technological dominance and prevent China from closing the gap. On the other, China is doubling down on its push for self-sufficiency, investing heavily in domestic research, innovation, and alternative supply chains. The stakes are immense, with implications that stretch far beyond the two nations involved. The ripple effects of this conflict are being felt across the globe. United States allies and partners, from Europe to East Asia, are caught in a difficult position. Should they align fully with American policies, potentially straining trade relations with China, or should they seek a middle path, risking their partnerships with Washington? These dilemmas are reshaping alliances and forcing nations to rethink their strategies in an increasingly multipolar world. Meanwhile, industries reliant on Chinese materials and American technologies are bearing the brunt of this conflict. Prices for rare earth elements are soaring, supply chains are being disrupted, and manufacturers are scrambling to find alternatives. For United States tech giants like Nvidia and AMD, the loss of the Chinese market has resulted in billions of dollars in lost revenue, while Chinese firms are accelerating their pace of innovation, determined to close the technological gap. This conflict is not just about trade policies or sanctions, it's a battle for the future of global power. The United States sees its actions as a necessary defense against a rising rival, while China views them as an unjust attempt to stifle its growth. And as both sides dig in their heels, the rest of the world watches, bracing for the impact of a conflict that could redefine the global order. In this high-stakes contest, one thing is certain: the world is at a technological crossroads. The decisions made today will shape industries, alliances, and even the geopolitical map of tomorrow. Will the United States succeed in maintaining its lead, or will China's resilience and strategic countermeasures turn the tide? The next chapters of this story promise to be nothing short of transformative. Trade wars are not a new phenomenon. They are as old as international trade itself, often emerging when nations seek to tip the balance of power in their favor. To understand the current US-China technology standoff, it's crucial to look back at the lessons of history, where trade conflicts shaped economies, altered geopolitical landscapes, and left lasting legacies. One of the earliest and most infamous trade disputes, the Opium Wars of the 19th century, serves as a stark reminder of how trade imbalances can escalate into outright conflict. In the 18th century, Britain faced a trade deficit with China, driven by high demand for Chinese goods like silk, porcelain, and tea. To correct this imbalance, British traders began exporting opium to China despite the devastating societal consequences it caused. The Chinese government, alarmed by widespread addiction and economic disruption, attempted to ban opium imports, triggering a fierce response from Britain. The ensuing wars were not just about trade but also about sovereignty and control. Britain's military superiority forced China into signing a series of unequal treaties, most notably the Treaty of Nanking in 1842. These agreements ceded Hong Kong to Britain, opened Chinese ports to foreign trade, and imposed reparations, marking the start of China's century of humiliation. The Opium Wars underline a critical lesson. Trade disputes, when left unchecked, can spiral into conflicts that alter the trajectory of nations for generations. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 offers another cautionary tale. Enacted during the Great Depression, this U.S. law aimed to protect domestic industries by imposing steep tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. However, instead of bolstering the economy, it triggered a wave of retaliatory tariffs from trading partners, including Canada, which targeted U.S. exports. Global trade plummeted by 65% between 1929 and 1934, deepening the economic downturn and prolonging the Depression's effects. The consequences were devastating. U.S. exports fell by over 60%, and unemployment skyrocketed as industries reliant on trade suffered massive losses. Economists now widely regard Smoot-Hawley as a policy failure that exacerbated the very crisis it sought to address. The lesson here is clear. Protectionism can backfire, leading to economic isolation, diminished growth, and strained international relations. Another example of trade conflict, albeit on a smaller scale, unfolded in the 1960s with the so-called chicken war between the US and Europe. In an effort to protect their domestic poultry industries, European nations imposed tariffs on imported US chicken. The US, under President Lyndon B. Johnson, retaliated with a 25% tariff on European imports, including light trucks and brandy. While this measure protected American automakers, it also disrupted trade and highlighted the long-lasting effects of retaliatory policies, effects that persist today as the chicken tax on light trucks remains in place. What do these historical episodes tell us about the ongoing US-China trade and technology dispute? First, they reveal the dangers of escalation. Trade wars, while often initiated to protect domestic interests, can lead to unintended consequences, such as economic stagnation, strained alliances, and even geopolitical conflicts. Second, they underscore the importance of strategic foresight. Nations that fail to anticipate the broader ramifications of their trade policies risk undermining their own goals. In the current context, the parallels are striking. Just as Britain's exploitation of trade imbalances led to conflict, and Smoot-Hawley's protectionism backfired, the US and China are locked in a standoff with far-reaching implications. The US aims to safeguard its technological edge, while China is determined to achieve self-sufficiency and resist external pressures. Both nations are playing a high-stakes game where the lessons of history loom large. As the world watches this unfolding conflict, one question remains: will the US and China heed the warnings of the past, or are they destined to repeat its mistakes? History suggests that the costs of a prolonged trade war extend far beyond economic losses. They reshape the global order itself. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the path forward is fraught with both peril and opportunity. In the annals of global trade disputes, few rival the intensity and complexity of the current standoff between the United States and China. What began as a tariff war has evolved into a battle over technology, a contest not just for economic dominance, but for control over the industries that will define the 21st century. The roots of this conflict trace back to the Trump administration, when the U.S. levied sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports, citing intellectual property theft and unfair trade practices. However, this was only the beginning. The real fight emerged in the tech sector, where the U.S. imposed stringent export restrictions targeting China's semiconductor and artificial intelligence industries. Central to these efforts were measures like placing Chinese tech giants Huawei and SMIC on blacklists, controlling advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment exports, and expanding the Foreign Direct Product Rule to restrict access to critical U.S. technologies. Why focus on semiconductors and AI? These are the backbone of modern economies. Semiconductors power everything from smartphones to fighter jets, while AI is revolutionizing industries from healthcare to defense. For the U.S., limiting China's access to these technologies is a matter of national security and preserving its global technological edge. But for China, it's seen as an existential threat, a move designed to stifle its rise as a global power. China, unsurprisingly, has not taken these actions lying down. Beijing has retaliated by leveraging its dominance in critical materials essential to high-tech industries. In a bold countermeasure, China restricted exports of rare earth elements like gallium and germanium, vital for semiconductors, electric vehicles, and advanced weaponry. These restrictions have sent shockwaves through global supply chains, forcing industries dependent on these materials to scramble for alternatives and driving up prices. The stakes are immense. For the U.S., the challenge lies in maintaining pressure on China without alienating allies or disrupting global trade. Washington's export controls have strained relationships with key partners, including major technology firms in Taiwan, South Korea, and the Netherlands, which fear being caught in the crossfire. Companies like ASML and TSMC, leaders in semiconductor manufacturing, are increasingly exploring ways to reduce their reliance on U.S. technology to sidestep the restrictions. On the Chinese side, the pressure has accelerated efforts to achieve self-sufficiency. Beijing has poured billions into research and development, fostering domestic innovation in AI, quantum computing, and telecommunications. Companies like Huawei are unveiling advanced products that signal remarkable progress despite the restrictions. China's indigenous innovation strategy, supported by state-led initiatives and partnerships with nations outside the U.S. sphere of influence, is paying dividends. For instance, Huawei's latest AI chips and smartphones showcase cutting-edge design and manufacturing techniques, signaling that China is not merely catching up, it's forging its own path. This modern trade war is about more than just economic leverage, it's a struggle for geopolitical supremacy. The U.S. seeks to preserve its position as the leader of the global technological order, while China aims to rewrite the rules, creating a multipolar world where Western dominance is no longer a given. This contest has drawn comparisons to the Cold War, but unlike the ideological battles of the 20th century, today's conflict is defined by supply chains, patents, and innovation. Yet this tech war is not without collateral damage. U.S. companies like Nvidia, AMD, and Lam Research have reported significant revenue losses due to reduced access to the Chinese market, limiting economies of scale and weakening their global competitiveness. On the Chinese side, restrictions have disrupted supply chains, delayed projects, and raised costs. The ripple effects are felt worldwide, as nations dependent on U.S. or Chinese technologies are forced to navigate an increasingly fragmented global market. The U.S.-China tech standoff is not just a bilateral issue, it's a global one. As the battle intensifies, other nations are being pulled into the fray. Countries like India, Vietnam, and Mexico are emerging as alternative hubs for manufacturing and technology, while Europe grapples with balancing its economic ties to China and its strategic alliances with the U.S. This modern trade war is reshaping the global economic landscape, forcing nations and corporations alike to adapt. The question is no longer just who will win, it's about what the world will look like when the dust settles. Will it be one of collaboration and shared progress, or a fractured system defined by competing blocs and perpetual conflict? One thing is clear, the outcome of this battle will shape the trajectory of the 21st century, with implications that reach far beyond economics. In the escalating trade war between the United States and China, Beijing has unveiled a powerful weapon of its own: rare earth materials. These seemingly obscure minerals, names like gallium, germanium, and graphite might not spark immediate recognition, are indispensable to modern technology. From semiconductors to electric vehicles, from satellites to advanced weaponry, these materials are the invisible threads holding the fabric of global innovation together. China's dominance in this sector is no accident. Over the years, Beijing has strategically positioned itself as the world's primary supplier, controlling over 70% of global rare earth production. This control has given China a unique advantage, one it is now wielding to counteract U.S. restrictions on advanced technologies. By restricting exports of these critical materials to the United States, Beijing has sent a loud and clear message. Two can play this game. The impact of these restrictions has been immediate and far-reaching. U.S. manufacturers dependent on rare earths are now scrambling to secure alternative supplies. Aerospace companies, renewable energy developers, and defense contractors, all industries vital to the U.S. economy, are suddenly faced with soaring material costs and supply chain disruptions. Prices for rare earth elements have spiked globally, creating bottlenecks that threaten to derail production timelines and innovation cycles. But the ramifications don't stop at economic inconvenience. China's rare earth restrictions are also a geopolitical move. aimed at fragmenting alliances and reshaping the global trade landscape. For nations caught in the middle, the stakes are high. Some may be tempted to align more closely with China to avoid the fallout of a prolonged US-China conflict. Others, particularly US allies, are being pushed to rethink their supply chain strategies, diversifying sources and reducing reliance on single suppliers. This realignment is not just economic, it's geopolitical, with the potential to redraw the map of global influence. China's actions have also underscored the vulnerabilities inherent in the global tech race. The US export restrictions aimed at crippling China's semiconductor and AI ambitions inadvertently revealed the extent to which American industries rely on Chinese materials. While the US has the technological edge in many areas, its supply chain dependencies leave it exposed in critical sectors. The rare earth gambit has highlighted these gaps, forcing Washington to confront the reality of its interconnected global trade networks. For Beijing, the rare earth counterpunch is as much about domestic signaling as it is about global strategy. By leveraging its dominance in this sector, China is not only pushing back against US policies but also showcasing its resilience. It's a declaration to its own citizens and to the world. China has tools at its disposal, and it's willing to use them to protect its interests. Yet, this strategy is not without risks. Restricting rare earth exports may strengthen China's negotiating position in the short term, but it could also accelerate efforts by other nations to develop alternative supplies. The US, Japan, and European nations have already begun investing heavily in rare earth mining and processing, with plans to reduce dependency on China. Australia and Canada, home to significant rare earth deposits, are stepping up to fill the gap, offering partnerships that could reshape global supply chains. The question is, who stands to lose the most in this high-stakes gamble? For the US, the immediate impact is clear: higher costs, slower innovation, and increased pressure on industries critical to national security. For China, the longer-term challenge lies in maintaining its dominance as the world diversifies its supply chains. While Beijing's rare earth leverage is formidable, it's not unassailable. This tug-of-war over rare earths encapsulates the broader US-China rivalry. It's a contest of not just economic might but strategic foresight. As both nations dig in, the rest of the world is watching closely, navigating the fallout and assessing how to adapt to a world increasingly defined by technological and material power struggles. Rare earths may be just one piece of the puzzle, but they symbolize a much larger battle, a fight over the resources, industries, and influence that will shape the 21st century. In this arena, every move counts, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Amid the ongoing economic rivalry between the US and China, a new battleground has emerged: the currency war. At the heart of this struggle lies the dominance of the US dollar, long considered the backbone of global finance. But the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are now rallying to create an alternative system that could threaten the dollar's supremacy. China, the driving force behind this initiative, has been steadily pushing for the internationalization of its currency, the yuan, renminbi. Beijing's strategy includes encouraging its use in global trade, establishing currency swap agreements, and promoting yuan-denominated financial instruments. Notably, China has urged major oil exporters in the Middle East to accept the yuan for transactions, a move aimed at breaking the petrodollar's grip on global energy markets. This shift, if successful, would deal a significant blow to the dollar's dominance, altering the dynamics of global trade and finance. The BRICS bloc is also working collectively to weaken the dollar's hold. One of their most significant moves is the establishment of the New Development Bank, headquartered in Shanghai. This institution funds infrastructure and sustainable development projects while promoting the use of local currencies for transactions. By reducing reliance on dollar-based financial systems, the BRICS nations are not only building economic resilience, but also shielding themselves from the geopolitical leverage the US wields through its control of global finance. This push has not gone unnoticed in Washington. President-elect Donald Trump has issued stern warnings to the BRICS nations, threatening sweeping 100% tariffs if they proceed with efforts to replace the dollar in global trade. The US views these moves as a direct challenge to its economic hegemony and is prepared to respond aggressively. However, the cracks in the dollar's dominance are already visible. Russia, facing extensive Western sanctions, has accelerated its de-dollarization efforts by increasing trade in rubles and yuan, particularly with China. Iran has joined the fray, signing agreements with Russia to use their respective currencies in bilateral trade. These efforts are complemented by India's exploration of mechanisms to facilitate international trade settlements in rupees, further signaling a global shift toward local currency use. For the BRICS nations, this strategy is about more than economic pragmatism. It's a statement of sovereignty. By creating financial systems independent of U.S. control, these countries are carving out space for greater autonomy in an increasingly multipolar world. Yet, the transition comes with challenges. Building trust in alternative currencies and institutions will require time, consistent policies, and a demonstration of stability. For the United States, the stakes are immense. The dollar's dominance allows it to influence global markets, impose sanctions, and fund its economy through the demand for its currency. A decline in the dollar's status would not only weaken U.S. economic leverage, but also force a reckoning with the vulnerabilities of its financial system. As the currency war unfolds, the global landscape is changing. The battle for financial supremacy is no longer a one-sided narrative. The U.S. dollar, once unchallenged, now faces competitors determined to rewrite the rules of the game. The question is not whether the dollar will face competition, it already does. The real question is how well the U.S. can adapt to a world where its financial dominance is no longer guaranteed. The escalating U.S.-China trade war and its ripple effects are not just reshaping the dynamics between these two superpowers, they're redrawing the contours of the global economy. As the battle intensifies, the fallout extends far beyond Washington and Beijing, pulling nations and industries into a new era of uncertainty and realignment. For the United States, the economic backlash is already taking its toll. Industries reliant on Chinese imports, from electronics to consumer goods, are grappling with higher costs as tariffs drive up prices. American farmers, particularly those exporting soybeans and pork, have been hit hard by China's retaliatory tariffs, forcing the U.S. government to issue billions in subsidies to offset their losses. Yet, these short-term fixes do little to address the structural disruptions created by this prolonged trade conflict. China, too, is feeling the strain. The U.S. export controls on semiconductors and advanced technologies have slowed progress in critical industries, forcing Beijing to double down on domestic innovation. While Chinese firms have made impressive strides in areas like AI and telecommunications, the road to self-sufficiency is fraught with challenges. The restrictions have also pushed China to strengthen ties with non-U.S. technology providers and forge strategic alliances with countries willing to bypass Western dominance. But the true impact of this economic standoff lies in its ability to accelerate global fragmentation. Nations are being forced to pick sides or find ways to hedge their bets. U.S. allies, such as Japan and South Korea, are facing tough decisions about how closely to align with Washington's policies without jeopardizing their own economic ties to China. Meanwhile, emerging economies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are exploring opportunities to benefit from the shifting trade dynamics, positioning themselves as alternative hubs for supply chains and investment. The trade war is also pushing companies worldwide to rethink their global strategies. Multinational corporations are diversifying their supply chains, reducing reliance on any single country to mitigate risks. Vietnam, India, and Mexico have emerged as key beneficiaries, attracting investments as businesses seek alternatives to Chinese manufacturing. However, this shift is not without cost. Relocating supply chains is a complex and expensive process, and it may take years to see significant returns. Perhaps the most profound consequence of the U.S.-China tensions is the erosion of the globalized economic order that has defined the post-Cold War era. Trade barriers, technological decoupling, and financial fragmentation are creating a world where economic blocs compete rather than cooperate. For smaller nations, navigating this landscape will require careful diplomacy and strategic alliances to avoid being swept up in the power struggles of larger players. The stakes extend beyond economics. The U.S.-China rivalry has become a defining feature of 21st-century geopolitics, influencing everything from climate policy to military strategy. As both nations vie for dominance, the risk of miscalculation grows, raising concerns about potential flashpoints that could escalate into broader conflicts. For the rest of the world, the challenge is clear: how to adapt to a landscape where the rules are still being written. Nations and businesses alike must navigate this turbulent environment balancing economic opportunities with the risks of over-reliance on any single power. As the US and China continue their high-stakes chess match, the global economy stands on the precipice of transformation, a transformation that will define the decades to come. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Italy's evolving role on the global stage. If you've enjoyed this analysis, please consider supporting us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you insights into the forces shaping our world.